This meeting is now being recorded. Good evening and welcome to the Connecticut Department of Transportation's Public Information Meeting for State Project Number 170-3480. This project is a statewide road diet feasibility study. Tonight, the team is presenting the findings and recommendations associated with the potential implementation of a road diet along Route 349, also known as Eastern Point Road in the city of Groton. My name is Chris Granatini, and I am the project manager for Ty & Bond. Ty & Bond was hired by the Connecticut Department of Transportation to conduct this statewide road diet feasibility study. I would like to welcome everyone who's taken the time to join us tonight. We hope our presentation will be informative and that we are able to answer all of your questions and concerns during the Q&A session, so that by the end of tonight's meeting, you will have a better understanding of what a road diet is and what the recommendations are for Eastern Point Road. Before we start the presentation and introduce the project team, I would like to go over a few housekeeping items and explain the format of tonight's meeting. Our presentation will last approximately 30 minutes. Once it is completed, we will host a live question and answer session. You will have three means of communicating with us during the live Q&A. Option 1 is to send an email to dotp@ct017-3480groton@ct.gov. Option 2 is to leave us a voicemail at 860-944-1111. The third option is to type your question directly into the live event Q&A in Microsoft Teams. You can ask a question by clicking on the little question mark. This will bring up your live event Q&A field. Select the Ask a Question button at the bottom right screen, and a field will pop up where you can type your question and then hit enter or the little arrow button to submit your question to the project team. You can also check the box at the bottom to post your question anonymously if you prefer. Please note, there will be a slight delay, but eventually your question will appear in the featured section with all the other questions asked tonight. We also have a project webpage where a recording of tonight's entire presentation, including the Q&A session, will be stored. The webpage will also contain the same information that I've previously explained on how to provide comments or ask questions. The webpage address is portal.ct.gov/DOT/GROTON170-3480. Lastly, please remember that the comment period will be open through October 19th, 2020 via either email or telephone shown on the screen. The team chat function is only available during tonight's live Q&A session. The project team would greatly appreciate it if you could fill out the demographic survey the department has through SurveyMonkey. This is a very brief survey. Virtual public information meetings are both new and necessary for the department and for most of the project team tonight. This is our first go-around conducting a Microsoft Team live event. The survey will help the department improve these public meetings going forward. There is also a civil rights flyer that's available. And finally, no person shall, on the basis of race, color, or national origin, be excluded from participation or subject to discrimination in the development of this project. I would now like to introduce the project team. Representing the Connecticut Department of Transportation is Joe Willett, the state safety engineer. CONDOT was the lead agency, and served as the project manager of the statewide road diet feasibility study. The presenters for tonight's meeting are myself, Chris Granatini, the project manager for Tie and Bond, and joining me are Michael Morehouse and Parker Sorensen from Fitzgerald and Halliday. The agenda explains what we will be presenting tonight, including information about the overall road diet study, the process, the Route 349 road diet recommendations, and then we'll have the live Q&A discussion. The goals and objectives of the road diet study are to improve overall safety on Connecticut roadways, to improve access and mobility for alternative travel modes like pedestrians, bicycles, and transit, to utilize a low-cost solution to improve safety, which the road diet is. And the road diet is a proven safety countermeasure by the Federal Highway Administration. By now, some of you might be asking yourself, what is a road diet? A road diet is just a fancy name for reducing the number of travel lanes on a multi-lane roadway. It does not typically change the roadway width, but rather restripes the existing roadway with fewer lanes and wider shoulders. And the pictures at the bottom just show an example of that, where a 4-lane roadway was converted to a 3-lane roadway with wider shoulders for bicycles. Looking a little more closely at the Route 349 road diet, the project limits are Eastern Point Road from Benham Road to Chester Street. That section of Eastern Point Road is currently 3 lanes wide, and we're proposing to convert 3 lanes to 2 lanes. We would reuse the space for wider shoulders, which could accommodate bikes in the shoulders and also increase the buffer between cars and the sidewalks. So why are we proposing a road diet? A road diet is a proven safety countermeasure. Across the country, they've been shown to reduce overall crashes from between 19 and 47%. They reduce rear end and left turn crashes, and they can also calm traffic and provide for more consistent travel speeds on a section of roadway. Another benefit is that through a road diet, you really convert a roadway to a community-focused complete street that accommodates all road users. And finally, a road diet is beneficial because it can be implemented at a very low cost. For Route 349, the state is conducting a repaving program right now, and if the road diet is approved, we would just apply the road diet pavement markings following that project. We are considering a road diet for 349 because ConnDOT and its consultants, we have a professional and ethical responsibility to prioritize safety. We don't want to encourage high-speed vehicular mobility at the expense of human injury or loss of life. And we want to look at the transportation system for all users, not just cars, particularly the vulnerable and underrepresented populations. And finally, we're conducting this study to provide the opportunity to meet these safety objectives. The purpose of this public information meeting is to present the community with the data, the concept plans, and the results of our study of why we believe we will make Route 349 safer and more accommodating by implementing a road diet. However, it is each community's ultimate choice to support this safety initiative, and your input is vital to this process. But first, let's go over some of the pros and cons of a road diet. I'd like to introduce Michael Morehouse from Fitzgerald and Halliday, who will take you through the next few slides.
Thanks, Chris. I'm Mike Morehouse with Fitzgerald and Halliday. We're a planning firm that focuses on creating livable places, and that includes developing and designing streets that are safe, equitable, and accessible by all people. So one of the things that we do is we look at streets based on how they're used, and everybody seems to really understand the mobile uses of the streets. This is the trucks, the cars, the buses, the vehicles that move people around. Well, streets also move non-motorized traffic. People walk on streets, they bike, in neighborhoods, they play on streets. So these are really the mobile users of the street. But streets are more important than just the mobile users. They also define places. They provide accessibility to the places we live, to where we work, the institutions, our schools, our playgrounds, our places of recreation. So streets play a very, very vital role in our communities. In the transportation literature, this is a chart that's shown very often. And what it basically says is that streets all fall on this continuum from the smaller local roads where your homes are up to the busy arterials where a lot of the businesses are. And the local roads are really about all access, very little throughput. Arterials are really all about throughput. They're designed to move vehicles fast, high volumes, and collectors bridge those two and fall somewhere in the middle. But the reality is that's really not how roads work. All roads have a certain degree of access and a certain degree of throughput. And it's important to remember that because our arterial roads, which are designed to carry a lot of traffic, often have some of the highest accessibility in terms of lots of driveways to access property. What is a road diet and how can it help this condition? Well, a road diet, simply put, is the reduction in travel lanes of a particular road. In many cases, this involves converting 4 lanes down to 3 lanes. So these arterials, which typically have 2 lanes in either direction, have multiple driveways, are really often good candidates for road diets because you don't really always need all 4 lanes to carry the traffic, and you make a much safer situation by replacing one of those through lanes with a 2-way left turn lane or left turn pockets. There are many benefits to this, including safety, operations, providing amenities for bikes and pedestrians, and of course, overall livability of a place. So taking each of these benefits one by one, we start with safety, which oftentimes from an engineering perspective is our #1 motivation. 4-lane roads are inherently unsafe because of intersections that we refer to as multiple thread intersections. When vehicles are making a left-hand turn out of a driveway or a side street, they have to consider 3 lanes of moving traffic to make that movement. So a driver has to look at the 2 lanes of opposing traffic that has to be crossed, as well as the moving traffic in the lane that they want to get into. So with 4-lane roads, many times traffic is traveling at higher rates of speed, oftentimes at higher volumes. It's very difficult to find a gap in the traffic flow to cross through all 3 of these lanes without getting hit. And what that results in is increased delay for those movements. Many times the driver gets impatient, makes an aggressive move to find a gap in the flow that is unsuitable for a safe movement, and that results many times in a crash. This is a drone video of a 4-lane arterial in Connecticut, and what it's going to show you is a typical right angle collision, in this case which was avoided, but using drone video and vehicle traffic software, we can show you an example of how this works. So this black vehicle making a left into the driveway is getting let through by that traffic in the middle lane, and that outside vehicle on the curb lane saw him at the last minute, stopped, and allowed that movement to proceed in a safe manner. However, if that traffic was going faster or if that driver was not aware, then that could have easily resulted in a right angle collision. The other thing we consider when we're talking about safety is traffic speed. And traffic speed is very important, especially as you get into communities where there's a lot more activity on the adjacent roadside, because as drivers, we can see much more of the overall space within a place if we're traveling between 10 and 50 miles per hour. Our peripheral vision is very wide. We can see our travel lanes. We can also see what's happening on the sidewalks. As speed increases, our peripheral vision diminishes. We start to focus a little bit more on what's happening on the road and a little bit less what's happening on the sidewalk. At higher speeds, this degrades even further. And then above 40 miles per hour, drivers are typically more tunnel visioned at that point. They're really focused on maintaining travel speeds in their lane, avoiding opposing traffic, but they're very oftentimes unaware of what's happening on the roadside. And this can create a very dangerous situation when there are pedestrians because it now takes much more time to react at higher speeds. Your vehicle requires more mechanical stopping force to come to a stop in a short space, and the crash risk is very, very high. And all of the studies show that a collision between a vehicle and a pedestrian many times results in a fatality above 40 miles per hour. So there's a general myth that if you go from 4 lanes to 3 lanes, you're going to cause traffic backup. And it's understandable because the math is simple. 4 minus 1 equals 3. Obviously, there's less capacity in that 3-lane section. But the reality is not all lanes really behave the same way. We really have to look at how a lane is being used. And in a 4-lane road that have a lot of driveways, the inside lanes are oftentimes used for vehicles making left turns. So a vehicle making a left turn has to wait to cross 2 lanes of traffic to get into that driveway. And what happens is other vehicles start to position themselves on the outside curbside lanes. That often results in lane utilizations of 70 to 80% of traffic in those outside lanes and 20 to 30% on the inside. So that's not a really efficient use of a lane. So by reducing the travel lane, you're able to normalize the flow in those through lanes with 1 lane of traffic, and then the left turning vehicles can be managed in those center lanes or in those left turn pockets. It creates a much more efficient and much safer operational condition. And the reality is intersections are often the real determining factor in capacity. When you get to a red light, you have to stop to let other vehicles make their movements. And that's what really controls the amount of throughput in a road anyway. We also have to remember that level of service, which is a measure of vehicular delay, doesn't really describe what is experienced by other users. So pedestrians, bicyclists, people that take transit, they have different performance metrics that relate to their level of comfort and ease of travel. And we have to consider all of those users, not just those behind the wheel. So oftentimes trading a little bit of capacity really could be worth it by creating a much more balanced transportation system for everyone. Now, when it comes to considering what roads are good candidates for road diets, we have these common rules of thumb, and we use overall daily volume thresholds. So any road that has less than 10,000 vehicles a day is almost always a great candidate. Requires very little study. It usually works every time. 10 to 15,000 vehicles a day is really the sweet spot. We see a lot of 4-lane roads in this level of traffic, and they're prime examples of roads that could be converted. In most cases, they work. Between 15,000 and 20,000 vehicles a day, oftentimes they can work very well too. They require a little bit more study. They require a little bit more, management and creativity in how left turn conflicts are addressed. But a lot of times engineers can successfully convert a 4-lane road into a 3-lane in this volume threshold. Over 20, they can also work, over 20,000. There are great examples of roads that have 25, 20 to 26,000 vehicles a day that have been converted successfully to road diet. But at this level, they require much greater study. They don't always work. Sometimes they result in poor operations, reduced safety. Sometimes they can. It really all depends on the various conditions. And that's why when we think about roads with less than 20,000, those are the ones we usually target to look at further conversion to road diet. And from a pedestrian and bicycle standpoint, there are many benefits. Oftentimes, the road diet results in really a diminishing of the aggressive driving, really high-speed drivers, and that's safer for everybody. There could be up to an 80% decrease in crashes with pedestrians on roads just because of slower traffic. And it's actually really good for vehicles as well, because you have a road that's 4 lanes, you have a lot of weaving traffic trying to get around left turns. You have that crossing traffic that I showed you in the video, trying to get in and out of driveways, and overall crash reduction can be decreased by as much as 47%. So what do you do with the extra space that you take from that additional travel lane? Well, you can use it for many things. And this is just a visualization of one way you can configure a road to create a better roadside environment, a side trail in this particular case. But it could be anything. It could be bike lanes where you have a designated bicycle route that requires bike lanes. It could be on-street parking where you have a thriving commercial downtown environment. There's another commonly held argument that road diets will just push traffic away. The businesses on these 4-lane roads need traffic to survive, and you're going to hurt them economically by creating a road diet. Oftentimes, this is false. This case study, which was in Seattle, but really reflects the kind of conditions that we see all around the country and in Connecticut, is good because they did some measurement before and after the road diet. And this road carried 13,000 vehicles a day. And after the road diet was implemented, those really high-speed offenders, those people that were going 15, 20, 30 miles over the speed limit, those were reduced drastically, which also reduced the number of crashes. It also made pedestrian crossings safer. So now you don't have 4 lanes to cross. Crosswalks could be shortened. People walking have better visibility to traffic. So that created a much safer environment for people to move. Bicycle volumes increased dramatically. They took that additional lane width and they created bicycle lanes, and in some places even on-street parking. That was a benefit to businesses. The other interesting finding was that no traffic diverted. The road was still able to process 13,000 vehicles a day, and the highest levels of volume, which are typically experienced in the morning and afternoon peak hours, we call them, where all of that kind of commercial traffic is mixed in with commuter traffic, the peak hour capacity of the intersections and the road was maintained even in those really high levels of traffic use. There are also many studies that have shown that economic activity can actually be generated and stimulated by a road diet. This is an example of an entire system of road diets that was done in Indianapolis, where they took underutilized street space in the form of travel lanes and decided they wanted to create roads that were more balanced for all users. So they took those travel lanes and they made bicycle lanes and better sidewalks and landscape treatments, and created a much more functional street for all users. And what that resulted in was over $300 million of new development as businesses and people wanted to live in areas where they could move around more freely, that didn't have lots of high levels of high-speed traffic. So economic development can actually be really enhanced through a road diet. Are there disadvantages? Sure, there can be, and there could be increases in travel time. This is why we do a study, just to measure that. And we have to be careful not to measure it against travel time by vehicles that are speeding significantly over the speed limit, and therefore see a reduction in travel time because now they have to do a speed limit, but real decreases in travel time over a distance and based on actually the speeds that they should be driving. And then driver confusion. Sometimes this is difficult because I think people generally do understand how road diets work. They certainly understand 3-lane sections. They're all over the place, and people get into left turn pockets all the time, or they get into 2-way left turn lanes all the time and probably don't even think too much of it. But when you're converting a 4-lane road, 2-way, 3-lane, initially those who are familiar and comfortable with that 4-lane road may find it a little confusing at first, but people will adapt and ultimately we'll see this as an improvement over time. Back to you, Chris. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike. And now we'll move ahead and start to talk a little bit more in detail about the Route 349 road diet. Route 349 was selected for a road diet following an extensive screening process where we looked at every multi-lane, undivided highway across the state of Connecticut and conducted a screening process to identify potential candidate segments. From there, we conducted a detailed traffic engineering study of Route 349. And then finally, we developed conceptual pavement markings, which I'll show you in a little while. We used the following screening criteria to look at all the state roads and determine which ones were viable candidates. The criteria included the traffic volume on the street, the type of roadway cross-section. We wanted to look at segments that were at least a quarter mile in length. We also looked at driveway or curb cut density. We looked at safety, including collisions on each of the segments. And we also looked at how a road diet could have a beneficial effect on alternative travel modes. The segment of Route 349 being considered for a road diet is the 3-lane section between Benham Road and Chester Street. The segment is a half a mile long with a 35 to 37 foot wide roadway. That segment of Route 349 carries approximately 4,000 vehicles per day, and it has a posted speed limit of 25 miles per hour. And the uses are primarily industrial on the electric boat side and residential on the land side. Along that corridor, there are 2 traffic signals, 3 intersecting side streets, and 25 driveways. Considering the heavy pedestrian traffic that uses Eastern Point Road during shift change at Electric Boat, we looked at what type of multimodal accommodations exist. Currently, the segment of Route 349 has continuous sidewalks. It has crosswalks with pedestrian phases at the signalized intersections. It does have narrow shoulders, and that section is currently not served by any public transit routes. In order to support the traffic engineering study, traffic was collected at the signalized intersections. We collected traffic data at the intersection of Chester Street and Eastern Point Road prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. We collected morning peak hour and afternoon peak hour turning movement counts at that location. We did not count the intersection of Benham Road and Eastern Point Road because we are not proposing any changes to the lane geometry at that location. So the road diet will have no effect on how that intersection functions. The traffic operational analysis compares the existing conditions to the road diet conditions. It determines the operational effect of the road diet on the study corridor. We calculated levels of service and queuing lengths on the approach roadways at each of the 2 signalized intersections. And based on the study, we determined that only minor effects would take place following the implementation of a road diet. The road diet does require signal optimization. However, that just involves some changes in the intersection signal timings. This table presents the traffic analysis that was conducted at the intersection of Eastern Point Road and Chester Street. What this shows is that the road diet only has minor effects during the weekday morning peak hour on levels of service. Level of service is a metric that traffic engineers use to determine how an intersection operates. It uses a grading system similar to school, where a level of service A or B indicates very good operations, and the grading system then includes C, D, E, and F, where F is considered failing operations with heavy congestion, delays, long queues, etc. So based on the findings of the traffic engineering study and reviewing the corridor, we've determined that the road diet is feasible with minimal operational effects on the study intersections. What we're proposing is to convert the road to provide 1 travel lane in each direction of 12 feet wide, and then a 5 to 7 foot shoulder in each direction. So in essence, we're reducing the roadway from 3 lanes to 2 lanes. At the Eastern Point Road intersection with Chester Street, we're going to maintain the existing northbound right turn lane. However, we're going to convert the westbound share left-right turn lane to a dedicated right turn lane. So at the intersection, In the westbound direction, you'll have one right turn lane and one left turn lane. On Eastern Point Road, we're going to provide a left turn lane into the Lot G driveway and then maintain the existing lane arrangement at Benham Road. Also, this segment was identified in the recently completed JLUIS implementation study for consideration of a road diet as part of that study's multimodal recommendations. And now I would like to introduce Parker Sorensen from Fitzgerald and Halliday.
Thank you, Chris. My name is Parker Sorensen. I'm a senior traffic engineer at Fitzgerald and Halliday. I conducted the safety analysis for this corridor as well as all corridors in this project. This corridor, we looked at a crash history, 3-year crash history between 2016 and 2018 for the corridor between Chester Street and Benham Road. There actually was only one reported crash in this 3-year period, and these are crashes that were reported to the Yukon Crash Data Repository available online. This crash was not identified as a target crash or a crash that we believed could be mitigated from the implementation of a road diet. We used federal highway research to identify target crashes from the Yukon Data Repository in this entire project, which looked at rear end crashes, angle crashes, side swipe crashes outside of intersection centers, as well as crashes that occurred when there was no dedicated turning lane at a signalized intersection where a road diet might be able to implement one. Target crashes were also identified in this project as crashes involving pedestrians and bicyclists. But again, this crash was not identified as a target crash in this corridor. The one crash that we did have in this 3-year history was a front to rear crash, so a rear end crash that only resulted in property damage. And that crash was located at the far extent of the corridor at Route 349 and Benham Road.
Now I would like to present the concept plan for Route 349. On the slide, north is to the left, south is to the right, and east is to the top of the page. Chester Street comes in from the top of the page and intersects with Eastern Point Drive. Eastern Point Drive provides 2 southbound lanes away from the intersection and 2 northbound lanes approaching the intersection. Chester Street provides 2 westbound lanes, an exclusive left turn lane, and a combined left turn right turn lane. And finally, in the southbound direction, Eastern Point Road provides a left turn lane and a through lane. Under the proposed condition, we modify Chester Street to provide an exclusive right turn lane and an exclusive left turn lane. As you head south away from the intersection with Chester Street on Eastern Point Road, we provide a left turn lane into the parking facility. In the northbound direction on Eastern Point Road, we maintain the existing lane arrangement with an exclusive right turn lane and a through lane. The change comes when we head further away from the intersection, where we eliminate the 2 southbound lanes on Eastern Point Road in favor of 1 lane in each direction with wider shoulders. As we move to the middle portion, in the existing condition, we still maintain the 2 southbound lanes and 1 northbound lane. We continue that proposed condition where we maintain 1 lane in each direction with wide shoulders in both directions. As we approach the intersection with Benham Road, we are not proposing any changes to the lane use at the intersection. As you can see with the road diet concept, we maintain 2 lanes, 1 in each direction with wide shoulders to a point just north of the intersection. And from there, we recreate the 3-lane approach with a left turn lane and 2 through lanes at the intersection with Benham Road. This cross-section illustrates what the proposed cross-section would look like on Eastern Point Road in the 2-lane section. As you can see, we're providing a 12-foot lane in each direction with approximately 6-foot wide shoulders, which can accommodate bikes. It also illustrates that the distance now between pedestrians on the sidewalk and vehicles is increased significantly. And finally, to just briefly touch on the project schedule, ConnDOT conducted the pavement rehabilitation project in September when the road was paved, and then temporary pavement markings were installed. Going forward, if the road diet is endorsed by the City of Groton, the department will remove the temporary pavement markings and install the proposed road diet pavement markings shown in the concept plans. They would also implement the traffic control signal adjustments that we mentioned and install new signs as needed. If the road diet is not endorsed by the city, the temporary markings will be removed and the permanent pavement markings installed, and it will look exactly like it looks today with no change from the existing condition. That concludes our presentation tonight. We will now start the live question and answer session. You can reach the project team by using the email address, leaving a voicemail on the telephone, or typing your questions in the Microsoft Teams live event chat box. Thank you. Good evening, folks. For the live Q&A session, we will start by reading each of the questions that are posted and then providing a response. The first question is from Brian Kent of Bike Groton. And the question reads, DOT's current standard for 2-lane state roads is 11-foot width. This helps slow traffic speeds as described in Joe's presentation. His examples show 10.5 and 10-foot wide lanes. Roads across the state are being restriped for 11-foot lanes. Why 12-foot lanes? The reason we're recommending 12-foot lanes for the Eastern Point Road corridor is twofold. First, the state considers having bicycles travel in shoulders adjacent to 10 or 11-foot lanes undesirable because it provides kind of a minimum of the ability to, it just creates a tight cross section. And the other part of the question is we're seeking to provide a shoulder width that's uniform and consistent. And as the shoulders get much wider than 6 feet, it may start to encourage vehicles to park in the shoulders, and that's not something that we're trying to encourage along this section. So by using 6-foot wide shoulders, we're providing a wide enough shoulder area for bicycles to travel in, while also providing 12-foot lanes on Eastern Point Road. Hey, Matt, can you pull up the concept plans, please? You want to give us our next question, Nick? The next question is from Kate Rattan, and it reads, 349 was identified as the eastern shoreline path in this area, a priority bike facility. This is documented in the Southeastern Connecticut Council of Governments bike per plan previously provided to the department. We would like buffered bike lanes striped in this project. So the answer to this question is, given the current width of Eastern Point Road, we can't provide buffered bike lanes and also accommodate the two travel lanes that we need in the corridor. The current cross section just isn't wide enough for that type of facility. The next question is from Brian Sheffer, and it reads, will the white lines be painted on the road? For some reason, the white lanes were not painted on the road just south of the project area. So in general, Brian, the state does stripe the white edge lines on state highways. I'm not sure if you're referring to the current condition on the roadway that's out there today following the completion of the recent paving project. But in general, these roadways will have white edge lines. And currently the plan is to, as I mentioned in one of the final slides, the current plan would be if the road diet is actually endorsed by the town or the city, the state would then implement the road diet concept on, in the spring once pavement markings can be reapplied. The temporary markings that are out there today would come off, and the road diet pavement markings would then be installed on the roadway. What happens beyond the limits of this section of roadway were beyond the scope of our study. So we were, primarily focused on this segment of Route 349 under the context of a road diet study. The next question is from Councilor Andre Bumgardner, and it reads, earlier this year, an employee at Electric Boat was tragically struck and killed by a speeding motor vehicle on this very road. What considerations are being given to improving the Chester Street Eastern Point Road intersection to make it safer for pedestrians? So, Councilor, under this project, the scope of this study was to identify corridors that are candidates for road diets. And as we've mentioned, the section of Route 349 south of the intersection with Chester Street was identified as a candidate for a road diet. Ty and Bond was also involved in the JLUIS implementation study that I mentioned. And one of the components of that study were recommendations around Electric Boat that spoke to pedestrian-focused safety improvements. So I would refer you to the JLUIS study document for the recommendations in the city that we're focusing on safety for all travel modes as a resource to see what some of the recommendations were for improving these intersections for pedestrian traffic. The next comment is from Kate Rattan, and it reads, please consider lane reductions at the intersections to accommodate a bike lane through the intersections. Dropped bike lanes are a poor accommodation for cyclists. Kate, we understand that concern, and I think that the ability to reduce the lane widths in the intersections to provide a continuous bike lane through the intersections would require physical modifications to the roadway system. So we would have to widen Eastern Point Road, and that's a much more significant project scope than what we have kind of under the scope of this current study. If that's an improvement that the city and the region would like to kind of make as part of a larger safety project at this location, I think that would have to be pursued as a more standalone type of project where physical modifications were implemented as part of implementing the road diet. I don't know if anybody wanted to add anything to that. Okay, the next question is from Brian Kent from Bike Groton. Did the engineering study model elimination of turn lanes at Chester and Benham roads? The short answer is yes, Brian. When we did the traffic engineering analysis of the intersection with Chester Street and Eastern Point Road, we modeled both the existing lane use, which included the a westbound, so on Chester Street, it's a westbound right-left lane and a westbound left turn lane under the existing condition. And then under the proposed condition, we modeled the exclusive right lane and the exclusive left lane. And we presented the results of that analysis in the presentation, where we showed that only minimal effects were a result of that change in lane use. And then down at the south end of the corridor at Benham Road, we are not proposing any changes to the existing lane use at that location. So there's no impact to that intersection because we're not changing the operations of that intersection with the road diet. The road diet stops to the north of that intersection, and we return back to the 3-lane section. Maybe you can zoom down there and show that on the screen on the third concept plan. Please add. Okay, so we have another question from Brian Kent at Bike Groton. Please add to my previous question, elimination of the right turn lanes would allow continuation of bike shoulder up to each intersection. Brian, that is something that could be revisited, and we can certainly talk with the department and determine if they would like that intersection geometry reviewed as part of the documentation of this road diet for Route 349. We've got a comment from Brian Sheffer. Will bicycle markings be applied on the shoulders? The current plan is to not apply bicycle markings in the shoulders. The application of painted, the application of the painted bicycle markings could be a project that the city would pursue, but the city would have to take over the maintenance of the bicycle markings in the shoulder. So the painting of the bicycle markings are not something that the department would install as part of their pavement marking process, but they are something that the city could request approval to install under an encroachment permit by seeking the permission of the state. Another question from Brian Sheffer. How will cyclists navigate through the northern end of the project area where they need to cross an automobile right turn lane? A cyclist under that scenario would have to exit the shoulder area and enter the stream of traffic to pass through the intersection. If they were to take a right turn, they could stay along the right side of the road. And if they were going through the intersection, they would have to merge with traffic in the through lane and head north through the intersection that way. And that's under the current kind of physical constraints of the intersection. If the right turn lane in the northbound direction was determined to be eliminated through an engineering study, then that would change how the pavement markings were developed at this location. We've got another question from Councilor Andre Baumgartner. I respectfully challenge that the road is not wide enough to accommodate increased bicycle traffic. You have proposed 3 12-foot travel lanes. You can reduce to 2 12-foot travel lanes and have at least 5 to 6 foot bicycle lanes with a 2-foot striped buffer. Why is this not feasible? I guess I'm not specifically clear exactly where you're talking about. In this section of the corridor between the intersections, we're currently proposing 6-foot shoulders on either side of the road and 12-foot lanes. So we're eliminating the 3 lanes and going down to 2 lanes with the wider shoulders. And under that scenario, I don't think we could fit the additional 4 feet of buffer space within the current cross section of the roadway. Hey, Nick, was this a transcribed question?
Yeah, the counselor amended their question to say they meant 10.5-foot wide lane travel lanes.
Well, I think the minimum travel lane width on a state highway is 11 feet for a through lane, and we did kind of touch on the premise of not having narrow lanes in favor of the wider shoulders in a previous answer. But we can certainly, take a look and see if there's any flexibility in the proposed cross section. Keep in mind that this is that these drawings, while they look like design plans, they are somewhat conceptual in nature, and they were developed to facilitate both the understanding of what these various corridors that are being studied could accommodate with respect to lane widths and shoulder widths, but also to essentially facilitate this type of dialogue with the community. So, we will be taking all of these comments that are focusing heavily on the shoulder widths and the accommodation of bicycles on this section of Eastern Point Road, and we will be discussing that, within the team, with the department, to see if there's any modifications. Ultimately, what we will be seeking is an endorsement of this road diet concept by the city. And maybe Joe, could you maybe jump in and just talk a little bit about that endorsement process, possibly?
Yes, Chris. The Connecticut Department of Transportation works in conjunction with local traffic authorities and cities on concepts. And
we'll jump to the next question and then we'll come back to Joe. Another question from Brian Kent from Bike Groton. The proposed cross section at the north and south ends squeezes bicyclists by limiting the shoulder down to almost zero space. This is a safety risk. I believe that we answered a similar question that was presented by Kate Rattan that spoke to narrowing down the corridor, and my response to that question, which was similar to this, was that within the current cross section, without doing a physical modification to Route 349, we would either have to eliminate lanes at the intersection or do a physical improvement to increase the width of the roadway at those locations to accommodate the bicycle lanes through the intersection, rather than utilizing the existing cross section as it exists today. Another comment from Brian Kent. 11-foot lanes would result in 7 feet each side that could be subdivided into 5-foot bike lanes and 2-foot stripe buffer strips. This would discourage parking or passing. As I had previously mentioned, we will revisit the cross section with the department and determine, what the appropriate cross section is from a pavement marking perspective for Eastern Point Road between the two intersections. Did you want to jump back in, Joe, and answer the question about how this process works?
Oh, I apologize for that. I lost my communication for a moment. The Department of Transportation often works with the local officials, either local traffic authority or chief elected officials regarding projects. We seek their input, and it is very, very valuable. In this particular case, after the 2-week comment period, we're going to circle back with local officials and share the comments that were received as part of this process, as well as the ones received in email or voicemail thereafter, and talk to the city regarding what their feeling is, whether or not the department should move forward. If we do move forward, Chris, as you had indicated, we will restripe, provide the road diet as shown here. We're something similar. I understand these are concept plans. If the city decides not to move forward, the road will be returned back in its current configuration, and the road diet could always be evaluated at another time.
Do we have any other questions that have come into the live chat, Nick?
I have not seen anything else come in. We had a couple duplicate questions pop up, and just the general questions that we answered previously.
Can we post the survey information in the chat now? So once again, we just want to thank everybody that's joined us tonight. We do appreciate.
Chris, we had one more quick question come in.
Okay. The question from Councilor Andre Baumgartner: will some suggestions made tonight be factored into a final design decision? So as Joe just mentioned, this is a process that we are undertaking to, get feedback from the community, to understand what the goals and objectives are of the community, and to make sure that the concept that we're advancing forward with is something that the community supports and endorses. Joe did just describe the process that's followed, including coordination with the local traffic authority. And so, as he mentioned, we've got a 2-week, question and comment period that will extend to October 19th. Once that is completed, it will give the department and the project team and the decision makers in the city the information that is needed to make a educated and informed decision with the direction of the project and how we want to move forward with this project. And from there, the department would be asking the city to either provide an endorsement or to advise them that they don't want to move forward with the road diet at this time. Ultimately, this project will be documented and consolidated into a final road diet study report, which the department will continue to look at and rely on as they repave roadways, including 349 in the future. The opportunity to revisit decisions that may not be implemented now in the future are certainly there. A question from Kate Rattan: will heavy truck movements from development at Electric Boat delay final markings, pavement markings? So the corridor, like as I mentioned earlier, the corridor was paved, and temporary pavement markings were installed this fall. They were installed as temporary pavement markings intentionally with the purpose of being able to take them off in the near future, and install either the final permanent pavement markings in the existing location or to install the road diet pavement markings. And so I don't think the state is going to delay the pavement marking installation beyond the next few months or within the next pavement marking window that they had previously determined to install either the permanent or the road diet markings. So I don't think that is reliant on Electric Boat at this time, or that project that's happening at Electric Boat. We got a comment that came in via email from Mayor Keith Hendrick, and it reads: if the road diet is not completed this year, can it be revisited in the future years after construction is completed at Electric Boat Shipyard? And I think I just provided an answer to that comment where, the road diet can always be revisited. It can be revisited as a request from the city to remove existing pavement markings and install new markings. It can be revisited when the road is repaved again in the future. So, you know, pavement markings are not permanent. Pavement is not permanent, and there's always the opportunity, if the city determines that they don't want to change this corridor now because of construction, then, you know, revisiting the pavement markings in the future is something that would be up to the city to approach the department. The next question is from Brian Sheffer. Will there be additional crosswalks installed? Pedestrians have long distances to walk between existing crosswalks. There's no current plan to install additional crosswalks between the intersections on Eastern Point Road, and consideration of adding crosswalks was not given under this project. Do we have any other comments that have come in?
Nothing that I'm seeing.
So I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank everyone for joining us and providing comments. Once again, we do have a very brief survey that we are asking public information meeting attendees to fill out. I've zoomed in on the web address, which is www.surveymonkey.com//DW8T35J. And all this information will be available on the project website, which is once again shown on the screen right here, and in the meeting notice. So I don't want to cut off any other comments that could come in from the public, so we can give it another minute and see if anybody else has any other questions or comments.
Chris, we got another email question, which I will publish now.
This question or comment is from Frank Ritchie, and it reads, with 2 lanes and large tractor trailers entering EB's south yard, there will be horrendous roadway backups. These large trucks currently use one of the 2 current southbound lanes to park while waiting to enter EB. There can be 3 or 4 of these trucks waiting up to half an hour, causing no traffic flow in a 2-lane diet, which is totally unsatisfactory. I have lived on this street for 47 years and everything is fine. Don't change something that doesn't need fixing. I think that's, you know, valuable information for the department and the project team to have, and, you know, should certainly factor into the decision-making process for this corridor. Were there any other questions or comments in the voicemail or in the email at this time? Okay, well, I think that the stream of questions has at this point stopped. So once again, thank you everybody for taking your time to join us and to provide important feedback on this project. We'd encourage you to take the survey if you have a chance. It's all great information for the department to collect to understand how these virtual public information meetings are being received by the community, and to help us just get better at presenting the information for these projects. And with that, we'd like to thank everybody, and we are going to end the meeting now. So everybody have a good night, and thank you once again.